Well, welcome everybody once again to IAG Trade Talk. I'm your host, Andrew Scott, and we're here to talk all about Yokohama in Japan. It is the city that all the IR companies are going for. The two big ones are Macau and Genting that are still going for that. This was the place that everybody wanted, and there's a big election on August the 22nd, and that's going to perhaps seal the fate of what happens in Yokohama with an integrated resort. Here to talk with us about it is a great friend of IAG Trade Talk, Joji Kokuryo from Bay City Ventures. Welcome to the show, Joji.
Thank you, Andrew. And yeah, from the Bay City, Yokohama, exciting times. We're bracing ourselves for one of the biggest elections in the city's history. So the flyers are out, the campaign cars are running around, and all the candidates are making their first pitches. So yeah, lots to talk about.
Well, it's great to be able to talk to somebody like you. And we often talk to you about Japan, but this is really your home turf. You are right there near the Yamashita Wharf where it's going to be in Yokohama as we speak. And, you speak English so well, but yet you're Japanese and you've got gaming industry background. So you're just a perfect person to talk to. So thanks once again for being here and talking to us about this election.
Anytime.
So the Yokohama mayoral election, let's get into it. So it's on Sunday, the 22nd of August, and
yes.
Seems we are going to get a result that night. Is that right?
Yeah, in Japan, we usually get the results out in the late evening, sometimes even earlier when the surveys done by media outside the voting stations have clear results. But in this case, if we're going to see a very close race, it might go into the late night hours, maybe the AM of the night before, but by Monday morning, for sure we'll know the results.
Well, hopefully we won't have any Japanese equivalents of Supreme Court challenges or anything like that. We'll get a clear result on Sunday.
If it was ever to happen, it would be this election. So
this election, it's a crazy election, but let's get into that in a little bit later. And so I understand the transition period is only a week. The new mayor comes in the following Sunday, right?
Yes, that's correct. So her term ends on the 29th. And yeah, I mean, obviously she's running for re-election, so she's not planning to leave. But the transition period would take place from the 29th, or I should say the 30th.
Right. And her fourth term, right? Four-year term she's going for, yeah?
Yep. She's just finished, or she's finishing up her third term. So that's 12 years that she's been in office here.
Well, that's quite a long run, and we're not going to get the IR results until after the election. So talk to me about how the election could affect the IR. I mean, when is the IR result planned to come out?
Well, I mean, internally, I don't know what part of the process they are in this election, but I would assume that they're very close to making their decision. And the faster the better at this rate, because the April deadline for the national government application is coming soon. So I would expect it to be out within months if the IR policy continues. So within the month, I should say.
Right. But of course, the election may change all that, which we'll get to in a minute. But before we get to talk about the candidates, and there are 8 candidates in this election, I think it's the largest number ever for Yokohama mayoral election. Talk to me a little bit about the Yokohama mayor versus the Kanagawa governor. The Yokohama part of Kanagawa prefecture, right? What's the situation there? What's the relationship and the dynamic there?
Well, Yokohama, I mean, if you categorize it as a city, is the biggest in Japan. If you made it a prefecture on its own, it would be the 10th, I think about 10th place, the 10th biggest prefecture in Japan. So, yeah, population-wise, it's very big. And of course, it's the economic center of Kanagawa Prefecture. And so from that point, the governor of Kanagawa usually takes a step back in terms of influence, media exposure, just, general regard compared to the mayor of Yokohama. And to put that into perspective, yeah, I wonder how many people can name the governor of Kanagawa right now. So there you go.
Right. So it's like the Brooklyn of Japan, or the Bronx, maybe. I can never remember which one it is, but there's a borough there in New York that if it was a city on its own, I think it would be the 4th biggest city in the US.
Yeah.
So the incumbent Mayor Hayashi, she's 76 years old, 75 or 76. She's in not the best health, but yet going for her fourth term, which would make her 80 at the end of her term. Talk to us a little bit about her popularity, her what she has done in office, and her position on IRs.
So for Hayashi-san, and as the mayor of the city, I think the first thing that's really important to note is that her second term election win was a landslide. Like, she won by a lot, meaning that, you know, her first term was very highly valued. There's been a lot of reconstruction of the city center. We're getting a lot of facilities that are rebuilt. City office is brand new as well. So, you know, in terms of development, I think she's had some results. And then, you know, the next further step is the IR, bringing in more tax revenue, bringing in more opportunities for local businesses. In terms of popularity, though, that's kind of been her downfall, as well, as she played the political game where I know it's been reported that she had a clean slate on the IR topic before her previous election, and notably the Kanagawa governor election as well, which was 2 years ago. So just 2 years ago, apparently there was nothing on IRs going on. And, you know, look where we are now, where it's kind of entering the last stages of an RFP. And that really rubbed a lot of the population the wrong way. Whereas if she had been a little bit more open about the situation, could have changed things, might have not, we'll never know. But yeah, the fact that she kind of comes off as pushing some of the policies, unpopular policies on her own, doesn't really give a good image. And I think that's kind of where her popularity suffered.
Right. Well, let's go through the 8 candidates, and they're grouped into 3 groups. The first group of 2, which includes the incumbent mayor, Mayor Hayashi, pro-IR, there's Mayor Hayashi and Minayuki's son. Then the second group seem to be anti-IR, but only anti-IR because you are anti-IR, the population of Yokohama. They seem to be on the whole anti-IR. So if we are going to be governor, we're representing you. You don't want it, so therefore we don't want it. And then so that's Okanogi-san, Tanaka-san, Tsubokura-san. And then the third group are IRs are evil, must be stopped at all costs. It's the worst thing in the world. So we're talking about Matsuzawa-san, Ota-san, and Yamanaka-san. The 3 of them in order, the quotes from each of them are, casinos must be stopped, casinos are evil, and Yamanaka-san, casinos are a poisoned apple. So these 3 groups, sort of pro, and a little bit anti, and very anti. So let's go through the 3 groups. So starting with the pro. So you've talked a little bit about Hayashi-san. She's the only woman in the race. The other 7 are all men. She's 75, but she's also got the Minayuki-san. He's 57 years old, and he's pro-IR, which is he's for casino and integrated resort in Yokohama. Talk to me a little bit about him.
Sure. Well, I definitely wouldn't put him in the big group with a large chance to win. But he does bring up a lot of interesting points from a gaming industry perspective. I would say that he's the first politician, or I should say person running for a political office who's actually put ways of using the gaming revenue into his strategy. So he's mentioned, topics like welfare, social welfare, and for improvements for schools and children, especially on the facility part. So for that, I think he brings up a lot of good points. It's just kind of unfortunate that he doesn't have the political backing as the other major candidates.
You raise a good point there, Joji. We should talk a little bit about who's got a chance of winning. And ironically, there seems to be one in each of the 3 groups that has a chance. So even though it's an 8-horse race, really it's a 3-horse race, right? Hayashi from the pro group, Okanogi from the mildly anti group, and Yamanaka from the vehemently anti group. So let's talk about the mildly anti group, and that's led by Okanogi, which he seems to be the favourite to win this election. Could you tell me about him and the other two candidates as well, perhaps?
Sure. Well, I think for Okonogi, his situation is quite unique in that he has the support of the majority Liberal Democratic Party. I'll just keep calling them LDP. But he's not in favor of their main key policy, which was the IR. And so LDP, of course, most people will know that's the party of former Prime Minister Abe, current Prime Minister Suga. So they have a majority, not only in Yokohama, but in the country as well. And so he caused quite a stir when he decided to run as an independent against the IR policy, even though he was working under the cabinet, this current Suga cabinet. So for him, first, he came across as kind of this rebel, hometown guy. He's born and raised in Yokohama, which was a great image. And then now he's actually come to receive the LDP's backing, as well as even Prime Minister Suga's backing, which I'm not really sure, to be honest, is 100% positive thing, considering that the current Prime Minister's approval rating is at the lowest. So if I was in that campaign party, I would definitely be hoping that the Prime Minister doesn't cause any more popularity concerns in the next week or so. As for the other two in that group, I mean, Tsubokuro-san, he's kind of, there as the people's candidate, just there to make a point. There's a funny story where when he decided to run and told his wife, she asked for a divorce. So, but he's a funny guy, great guy. He has some, good points to make and a statement to make. And as for Tanaka-san, who is the former governor of Nagano, name value very high. Most people in Japan know who he is. He's famous as a writer and these days. But political foundation in Yokohama is almost non-existent, and I think you can see that in the funding of the campaign. And where you see that is in Japan, we have this thing where the most well-funded campaigns have their posters up on the first morning at 6-7 a.m. in the morning. We had a typhoon here on that day, actually 3 days ago. The posters for the big three candidates were up regardless. And that's, just one way where you can kind of gauge how much funding they have. So yeah, for those three candidates, Okonogi-san is the big one for sure.
And perhaps you could explain to our viewers what you mean by 3 days ago. There was a procedural process to open the rolls or announce the official announcement or something?
Yes. So the official notification of the election for the mayor, it's a procedural thing, but it's, for us, the voters, it's a day where we see the campaign posters and we can confirm who the candidates will be. So, that happened on the 8th.
Very good. So let's move on to the final group, the guys, I guess, in our industry don't want to win, particularly Yamanaka-san, the poisoned apple guy. Tell us about them.
Actually, his name was out in the media before this election as a data scientist, especially in terms of how the Delta variant is, or I should say the vaccine that's going around right now is effective against, or how effective it is against the Delta variant. So he's been in the media recently. I've seen in the past few days, actually, that during his campaign, one of the things that he really stresses is the fact that gathering information and making informed decisions is the most important thing for the containing the COVID pandemic. So that's kind of the angle that I've seen him take in the next few days. And, to be honest, he's not a politician, but he was an expert in that field. So that's one way of going about it, which is effective, I think.
Well, we've seen around the world that non-politicians are very good at winning elections. So you never know. And so in those three groups, the pundits are sort of saying that Okonogi is probably the strong favourite, maybe a 50% chance to win. And then the other 50% essentially split between Mayor Hayashi and Yamanaka-san. That's kind of the prevailing wisdom, is that right?
Well, yeah, with the reports and the word going around, definitely that's how it is. Although I would say that it's closer than it seems, and there's two factors for that. One is a recent phone survey done by media here showed that more than half the people that responded hadn't decided who they were going to vote for,
Right.
and that means this, less than 2 week campaign period is going to be key, and especially for Yamanaka-san, because people have never really heard him talk before about politics. So how he comes off on that front will be very important. And the second thing is, if you talk about all this backing and support and of the political parties, the organized vote is, of course, very important in Japan, same as any other country, but maybe even more when the voter turnout is less than 50%. Okonogi-san has the biggest organized vote foundation. That's definitely a fact. Second in that point would be Yamanaka-san, who has the official backing of the Constitutional Democratic Party, I think is what they're going by now, and as well as the Communist Party. And they have 29 seats in the city council put together. So from a political foundation point, Yamanaka-san is a little bit in the lead of Hayashi-san. But of course, incumbent mayor Hayashi-san also has the current votes from the community, the economic community, but as well as the connections that she's made 12 years in office. So it's really putting her on the spot of seeing how people value her previous 3 terms.
So the economic community, the chambers of commerce, the business owners are sort of behind the incumbent Hayashi by the sounds of things, yeah?
Yes, definitely. And I think the IR policy in itself was heavily promoted on their side, and for good cause. I mean, anything to bring economic stimulant to the city is welcome for sure. So that's not a surprise, and they haven't changed their stance.
It sounds to me, and please, I'm really interested in your view on this, that Okonogi-san, I mean, it sounds a little bit like, I mean, this guy was an LDP guy. He was in favor of, the LDP's in favor of IRs. They're promoting IRs. In fact, wasn't he even please correct me if I'm wrong, wasn't he even the cabinet minister in charge of the regulator or something at one point? So he's really a pro-IR guy. Suddenly he runs for mayor of Yokohama, and suddenly he's anti-IR because you want it to be so. And Suga supports him, even though Suga is in favor of IR. This sounds to me like, is he just trying to win the election? And then once the election's through, he can flip and go back to being pro-IR. Is that a scenario you see possibly playing out?
So me personally, I don't see that playing out. And that's just because of communication with that campaign party. But also, this, and I think this is unfortunate for the city, to be honest, but the national politics side has really taken a big, was really affecting this election. And so Yokohama City, again, we talked about how it's the biggest city in Japan and the mayor is the most influential person in the region. Mm. Is it better to have someone from the opposition party there in that spot? Or is it better to have someone, an ally, maybe not your party member, but an ally there, although you lose the IR policy battle? And I think from a big picture point of view, that's kind of where the LDP stands, and which is why when you have the 36 LDP cabinet members in Yokohama City, 30 of them are going to the Okonogi side. Has to do with that. I don't know, it might also have to do with the fact that those 36 council members were never voted in on the IR promise, right. But and the other 6 with Hayashi-san. So there's a lot of politics going on that are not necessarily just about Yokohama. And on that point, I think it's quite unfortunate, to be honest.
Well, they say in lots of elections that they're referendums on the country leader. So maybe this is the case in Japan as well. And if that, what you just said then is true, I'm going off on a bit of a tangent, but is that Suga, the Prime Minister, preparing to resign on IR policy and going, well, okay, I didn't get it through? Because if this fails, if Okonogi gets elected, and if what you say is true and my theory is incorrect, and IRs get cancelled in Yokohama, that's a bitter blow to Suga and the LDP policy, isn't it?
For the IR policy, definitely yes. But I don't think it affects the national policy, and that's kind of where the country section is a little bit more bigger than the city situation. And the other thing for the IR, and I think this is why it's really important, and I like how you divided it into three different groups. But being against the IR for this election doesn't necessarily mean that they won't look into it for another round. And again, that's an important point. The other thing, and on the other side of things, actually, and this is quite interesting, is that just because someone is in favor in IR doesn't mean that they're going to vote for Hayashi-san or Fukuda-san. There might be other factors that they weigh that are bigger, and to be honest, they don't really need one in 5 years. Might be their point of view. So there's a lot of different things going around there, but. I agree, though, from a national perspective, is it a good look for the national policy? Yeah, not really, right?
Right. I mean, we in our industry and the viewers who are watching this show are obviously very interested in the integrated resort, but it's only one issue to the people of Yokohama. Is it a keystone issue? Is it a big ticket item in this election? What are the issues that will decide this Yokohama mayoral election?
Well, it's tied into everything, and I have 5 different things personally that I think are important. But everything ties into the short-term and long-term economy of Yokohama. Even this situation with the IR, it's part of I would say, a long-term strategy on how to increase tax revenue. And if you look at the reality of the city, the working population, we have actually the highest resident tax in Japan. Very minuscule difference. I think it's like 0.25%, but 0.25% of nearly 4 million. So, that's one thing. And this working population is going to be aging soon, and we have to support them as well. It's very similar to the situation in Japan as a whole, but again, Yokohama City, where there's very few major corporations compared to Tokyo, it's almost about 9-1, I would say. And so that affects corporate tax revenue, things like that. So improving that on the long term is an important factor. Short term, just like everyone else, how are we going to get over this pandemic situation? How are we going to improve, or not even improve, but kind of recover from it? Is a key point. And so getting that message across for each candidate will be important with actual policies, not just, the usual, we'll make life living great here in the city. It can't be empty promises like that anymore.
Just a one-word answer. Remind the viewers and myself, who was the candidate who said, if I win the election, I will kill the IR on my first day in office?
Which person?
Was that Yamanaka? Sure. Obviously, it was
Yamanaka. It would either have to be Yamanaka-san or Okonogi-san, because everyone else wouldn't say that. Yeah, I don't know.
I apologize. I gave you a question without notice there, Joji. But I remember we reported it on IAG that one of those 3 said, "I'll kill it on the first day." And in that vein, last question. Let's move on to this character, the so-called Don of Yokohama, Yukio Fujiki, the 90-year-old who controls the Yamashita Wharf area, which is where the casino, an integrated resort, is proposed for. This is a colourful character. In Australia, we call them colourful racing identities, is I think the term we use in the media. And he quite notably said he would commit seppuku. He would get the samurai sword and kill himself on the day the integrated resort opened, if it was opened at Yamashita Wharf. Joji, who is this guy? What's his story? Why is he so influential? Tell us all about this kind of fun character.
Well, yeah, if you're ready for a 3-hour sit down, let's go through the whole story.
Just do it in 3 minutes.
Yeah, no, of course. There's people, like, I shouldn't say people, there's influential people in every city. They all have their reasons. I actually enjoy his freedom of speech, I should say, in an era, especially in Japan, where people are very careful about what they say. But again, he's not a public servant, so he's free to say what he wants if the media wants to hear it. I found that recent press conference he held quite entertaining. And it reminded me of days in another company I work for where we have an eccentric elder Japanese speaker, I should say. But I think the key point, though, is that he comes from an influential family. His family is in the transportation cargo business, which, if you live in a port city, is going to be quite successful. He's expanded from his father's business into a leader of sorts of the harbor area. Almost all the associations have him as a board member or an advisor, or he built them up himself. So again, very, very influential. And when we talk about the harbor, well, Yokohama City is not just a harbor, but the economic center is all based on trade that happens through the port. So that's maybe even more historically, maybe a little bit less now these days, but he still has his influence. And yeah, to just kind of put it short, again, the guy gets what he wants and he says what he wants and he supports who he wants, which is why you'll see him supporting the Yamanaka campaign, but at the same time saying at that press conference you just mentioned that he thinks Okonogi-san will win, quoting him. So, very free, kind of a breath of fresh air, but yeah, he has his own detractors in the city as well. So very colorful figure. If you want to know more, come to the city and talk to the locals. I think you'll hear a lot of interesting stories about him.
That sounds like he's a source of many good stories. Didn't early on in the race, he supported Yamanaka, and then at the press conference, the media asked him about Yamanaka. He said, I don't know who that is, or something like that.
Yeah, so, I think what he wanted to say was he didn't know who he was, but he talked to him and he was a good guy. I think he was quoted as saying, but his eyes are just like a little bit too wild or something like that, which is, again, it's quite funny that he would mention that, because if you look at the posters, I think no one would disagree. But also the one thing, and I think the missing point of all of this is that he does speak for a lot of the harbor community, which is going to be directly affected by an IR development. And does he have ulterior motives? I mean, we all have a brain, so we can think about that. But as well, you have to think about who he's representing from his professional point of view as well. So that's, Fujiki-san in a nutshell. If you want the docu-series, then let's get a production team going.
Very good. I think I did note he said he changed his tune. He went from there'll never be an integrated resort in Yokohama to now he's saying there'll never be one at Yamashita Wharf, but if you want to put one way over there somewhere on the outskirts of Yokohama, well, I could live with that. He did say something like that, didn't he? Which seems to indicate maybe there is some kind of motive behind his statements.
For sure. I mean, even after the press conference where he said he doesn't really know about Yamanaka-san, he appeared at a campaign kickoff party. So, yeah, okay. Free guy. I mean, yeah, I love it.
Very good. Joji Kokuryo, thanks once again for your time. It's been fun. It's been enlightening. I hope the viewers have learned something. You're a great source of knowledge and a great friend of ours. So thank you for appearing on IAG Trade Talk.
Yeah, anytime. And anyone who wants to know my vote, it's for whoever's bringing alcohol back to the restaurants as soon as possible. So if anyone on that campaign has my vote. So
that sounds like a vote very well used. And we'll see all of you next time on the next episode of IAG Trade Talk. See you then.